Good morning. The Subcommittee on Courts, Intellectual Property, and the Internet will come to order. Without objection, the Chair is authorized to declare recesses of the subcommittee at any time. We welcome all of our witnesses today. I'll say a word about our subcommittee chairman, my dear friend Howard Coble, who had a hernia operation earlier this week, and so we have him in our prayers and expect to see him back here very soon. I'll start with my opening statement and then turn to the ranking member of the subcommittee, Mr. Watt, for his opening statement. This morning, the subcommittee will hear from several individuals involved in the creation of copyrighted works. Next week, the subcommittee will hear from those involved in the technology sector. These two important components of our economy have a unique symbiotic relationship and are responsible for significant innovation in America. Today, we focus on the role of copyrights in U.S. innovation. To be sure, according to the framers of our nation, the very purpose of granting copyrights was to promote innovation. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 8 of the United States Constitution contains the foundation of our nation's copyright laws. It allows Congress to provide to creators for limited times the right to exclusively use their writings and inventions. The Copyright Clause was not a controversial provision. In Federalist Number 43, James Madison declared that the utility of this power will scarcely be questioned. Indeed, this provision was one of the few that were unanimously adopted by the Constitutional Convention. The framers firmly believed that granting authors exclusive rights would establish the incentive for them to innovate. They believed that this financial incentive was necessary to promote the progress of science and useful arts, and they were right. Today, America is the most innovative and creative nation in the world, thanks in no small part to the framers' foresight. U.S. copyright owners have created millions of high-skilled, high-paying U.S. jobs, have contributed billions to our economy, and have led to a better quality of life with rich entertainment and cultural experiences for citizens. However, from time to time, it is important to stop and listen to what our nation's creators have to say about whether the incentives are still working to encourage innovation. This committee's review of U.S. copyright laws provides the perfect opportunity to do just that. During today's hearing, we will take testimony from copyright owners who continue to produce the fruit of innovation that was envisioned when the framers planted the first seed. I thank the witnesses for coming today and look forward to hearing their testimonies, and I'm now pleased to recognize the ranking member, the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Watt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I also want to thank you for launching this comprehensive review of the U.S. copyright law and the challenges of the digital age. I believe that this is a very important undertaking and that we have a unique opportunity to not only advance the debate in this area, but to guide it in the right direction. In my mind, a comprehensive review starts with a fundamental appreciation of the constitutional framework of copyright law and policy. By re-examining the first principles that gave life to copyright protection, we can better develop policy that ensures that those principles are honored. Today's panel represents individual authors and creators from diverse segments of America that rely on copyright. It is not only helpful but important that we hear directly from creators on how copyright law and policy is working for them. There can be little doubt that creativity and innovation are at an apex in the 21st century, and that many economic interests are intertwined with the interest and livelihoods of creators. But copyright law and policy should not be about preserving existing business models, nor should it be about accommodating emerging business models. Ensuring that the intellectual labor of our creative communities is appropriately stimulated and compensated will guarantee that the public will continue to benefit from the enrichment the creators provide. Recognizing that policy should develop around the creator is sometimes easier said than done. We would be naive to not acknowledge that there are entrenched interests that cannot be disregarded in this review. But a careful examination of the constitutional and historical underpinnings of U.S. copyright law is a start. My vision of this comprehensive review also includes an assessment of the international copyright framework. Appreciating that framework is in this global digital environment will equip us with a better understanding of how best to reinforce our constitutional objectives. It also provides perspective on how and why our policies have developed historically and where and why those policies may have gone astray. One area where copyright law has strayed from both our constitutional foundations and international norms concerns the recognition of a performance right in sound recordings. I and other members of this panel have long advocated for and have the scars to show for it a historical correction of this anomaly. That is why today I am announcing my intention to introduce and circulate to my colleagues and ask them to join me as original co-sponsors of a bill that simply recognizes a performance right in sound recordings, and I plan to do this before the August recess. We've been talking about this for a while, and I think it's time for us to act on it. I believe that doing so will highlight how the law can take the wrong turn if policymakers fail to embrace the principles embodied in the constitutional protection of intellectual property. The story of performance rights, although related to the field of music, is instructive in other areas of copyright as well. As we continue our comprehensive review of copyright, I think that that story is a compelling one that reflects a departure from centering policy development on the intellectual labors of the artist and responding instead to market forces that, while relevant, should not be in a position to completely extinguish rights recognized and honored internationally. On my travel day, I usually pick up my iPod and move it from Washington back to North Carolina, from North Carolina back to Washington. And I was reminded this morning when I picked it up to put it in my pocket, I love this iPod. But it's just a piece of metal unless it has some content on it. It's critical, it's important, but without the creative content to put on it, it's worthless. So we need to get on with recognizing the performance right, and I think it will have some real impact for American musical artists, and it won't be extreme. It will be just a fair thing to do. This lack of recognition denies artists access to performance rights royalties already earned offshore. These funds sit unclaimed due to our inability to simply afford these artists what they deserve, legal recognition of a performance right. I think as we continue our review, we'll see that in other areas as well, when we have robust protections from the rights of the for the rights of the creators, this will incentivize the parties to negotiate in good faith, enter into compensation agreements domestically, and heighten the public's access and enjoyment of the products of the creative community. I look forward to this discussion and the coming discussions that we'll be having with other aspects of tech and content. And I thank the chair again for convening the hearing. Yield back.
I thank the gentleman for his opening statement and for his substantial interest in this issue and the contributions that he's made. We have a very distinguished panel today, and I'll begin by swearing in our witnesses, as is the custom of this committee. So if you would all please rise. Do you and each of you swear that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Will the record reflect that the witnesses answered in the affirmative? They may be seated. Each witness's written statements will be entered into the record in its entirety, and I ask that each witness summarize their testimony in 5 minutes or less. To help you stay within that time, there is a timing light on your table. When the light switches from green to yellow, you will have 1 minute to conclude your testimony. When the light turns red, it signals that the witness's 5 minutes have expired. Our first witness today is Ms. Sandra Astars, Executive Director of the Copyright Alliance, a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization established in 2006. Prior to joining the Alliance in January of 2011, Ms. Astars served as Vice President and Associate General Counsel at Time Warner for 7 years, where she coordinated the company's intellectual property strategies. Before her time at Time Warner, she spent 12 years as an attorney working on intellectual property and technology issues at Weil, Gottschall, and Manges. Ms. Astars received her JD from the University of Baltimore School of Law and her bachelor's degree in political science, history, and philosophy from Bard College. Our second witness is Mr. Gene Mopsick, Executive Director of the American Society of Media Photographers, where he oversees the Society's membership, financial, and legislative matters. He represents ASMP at events throughout the country and internationally and works closely with the Society's Board of Directors. Mr. Mopsick received his bachelor's degree in economics from Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. Our third witness is Mr. Tor Hansen, co-owner and co-founder of Red Eye Distribution and Yep Rock Records. Red Eye Distribution was founded in 1996 and has grown to be one of the largest independently owned music distribution companies in the United States. Yep Rock Records was founded a year later in 1997. Prior to starting his own company, Mr. Hansen worked as Director of Merchandising at Rounder Records Distribution, Hear Music, and Planet Music Borders Group. Mr. Hansen received his bachelor's degree from Westchester University in Westchester, Pennsylvania. Our fourth witness today is Mr. John Lapham, Senior Vice President and General Counsel of Getty Images Incorporated, where he manages the global team and counsels the company on issues regarding disputes, transactions, and intellectual property. Mr. Lapham previously served as Vice President of Business and Legal Affairs at Getty Images, where he managed the company's licensing and intellectual property matters. He received his JD from the University of Washington School of Law and his bachelor's degree in political science from Southern Illinois University. Our fifth and final witness is Mr. William Chirac, President of Stereo D, a 2D to 3D movie conversion company. The company was recently named in March 2013 as one of the world's most innovative companies. Mr. Chirac co-founded Stereo D in 2009, and in less than 3 years grew the company from only 15 employees to an international staff of more than 1,000. Prior to starting his own company, Mr. Chirac worked at Blue Star Entertainment and received his bachelor's degree from the University of Denver. Welcome to you all. Apologize to any of you whose names I mispronounced. And Ms. Astars, do I have your name right or correct? Wonderful. We'll start with you. You want to hit that button on the microphone.
Thanks very much. I thank Chairman Goodlatte, Subcommittee Chairman Coble, Ranking Member Watt for this opportunity to testify, and we send our wishes for a speedy recovery to the Subcommittee Chairman. Our members commend the committee for undertaking this review, and as Chairman Goodlatte mentioned, today you're hearing about the creative community's contribution to innovation, and next week you'll hear about technology's contributions. And while I believe it's important to hear separately from all the stakeholders, I want to say at the outset that the creative community does not view copyright and technology as warring concepts in need of balancing. To the contrary, we're partners and collaborators with the technology community, and in many instances, we are both authors of creative works and technology innovators ourselves. A robust and an up-to-date Copyright Act is important to all of us, and we must not lose sight of the fact that the ultimate beneficiary of such an act is the public at large. Semantic arguments aside, society cannot benefit from cultural works if the primary investors in these works, the authors themselves, are not served and protected. Copyright in this regard is a unique form of property because it comes from an individual's own creativity, their hard work, and their talent. It's not something that you inherit through the happenstance of birth or good fortune. And in many ways, it therefore embodies the American dream. And I can speak to this personally because I'm a first-generation American, and my parents were refugees to the United States. My father is a visual artist and an author, and he supported our family in a middle-class household through his work as a visual artist. Most copyright owners in the United States are people just like my father. They're neither famous nor wealthy. They're just normal people trying to make a living or supplement a basic living by using their talents. And they make our communities, our nation, and the whole world a much richer place to live. But unfortunately, the experiences of these people are the ones that are least often heard. Eric Hart, who is one of our grassroots members, is a prop maker from Burlington, North Carolina, and he invested several years of research and photographed over 500 images to publish his first book entitled The Prop Building Guidebook for Theater, Film, and TV. He made much of the information available on his website for free, and unfortunately, but not surprisingly, as soon as the book was released, it began to be pirated and distributed on sites for free download, with advertising dollars coming from the most famous brands in America supporting those sites. I don't know any way to define Eric's experience other than exploitative. We need to maintain a framework of laws that makes it worthwhile for people like Eric to invest the time, labor, and talent to share his knowledge with others. And I've personally chosen to defend copyright because, in my mind, it's the body of law that turbocharges the First Amendment. Justice Sandra Day O'Connor put it a little bit more eloquently, calling it the engine of free expression. But by granting the individual author the rights to his work, you lay the groundwork for new voices to thrive without having to rely on outside subsidies or outside influences in their writing and creating. I think there's little argument that copyright and the First Amendment together have produced extraordinary works of cultural and economic value, and that was the goal of the founders. The Supreme Court has repeatedly said that by first focusing on the author, the copyright law ultimately benefits all of society. And to benefit society, copyright law needs to do two things. First, it needs to encourage the creation of works, and second, it needs to promote the distribution of works. This requires respecting both the author's economic interests in being compensated, but also it requires understanding that many creators will not broadly disseminate their works unless they feel safe doing so on other non-economic grounds. So take, for example, the outrage that was spawned last year when Instagram changed its terms of service. Ordinary people across the country were rightly concerned that their personal photos would be used by others in unexpected ways and without their permission. Many professional creators have these same concerns. And I've had the experience of talking to civil rights era photographer Matt Heron, who once explained to me that the reason copyright is so important to him is not for the economic reasons that you might expect, but because it gives him the right to keep his collection of photographs of the Selma to Montgomery March together as one intact single body of work. And that ensures that that piece of history that he captured will be passed down to future generations as a coherent story and in the proper context. My written testimony catalogs a number of examples of how the creative industries are a major source of innovative ideas and new product development and new services. We're using new technologies in new ways. We're spurring the development of new technologies through our own creative work, and we're creating new technologies ourselves. This ultimately benefits amateur creators as well, with the diffusion of affordable software and hardware. Let me conclude by saying that a focus on and a respect for creators' rights reflects the values our country was built on, and it benefits all of us. I hope you'll keep this in mind as you examine the Copyright Act during the review process, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mopsick, do I have your name correct?
Thank you. ASMP wishes to thank Committee Chairman Goodlatte, Subcommittee Chairman Coble, and distinguished members of the committee, along with Ranking Member Mr. Watt, for this opportunity to testify on this important issue. Founded in 1944, the American Society of Media Photographers' mission is to protect and promote the interests of professional photographers who make photographs primarily for publication. ASMP is the oldest and largest trade association of its kind in the world. ASMP members are primarily freelance imaging professionals, creating images, both still and moving, for publication in advertising, editorial, fine art, and other commercial markets. Simply put, ASMP members and professional photographers like them create many and probably most of the images that the American public sees every day. They create this country's visual heritage. In fact, we have one of our members right here, John Harrington, taking photographs this morning. These images communicate the horrors of war and genocide, the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat, the events of everyday life, and the joy of discovery and travel. They create emotion, document history, and expand our knowledge. Much of the incentive to create, innovate, and the ability to control the sale and license of these works would be lost without copyright. Imagine National Geographic, the Sunday New York Times and its magazine, Rolling Stone, Travel and Leisure, Food and Wine, Saveur, Sports Illustrated, all without photographs. And not just any photographs, but photographs created by professionals to fulfill the needs of their clients, created under various conditions, on schedule, processed, and prepared for reproduction. Stunning images that consistently stretch the bounds of creativity and innovation. Each assignment is a challenge to create something new, never seen before. Communicate light, emotion, the facets of a commercial product, the history and location of an event. Professional photography enriches and opens our eyes to new worlds, making us better informed and more sensitive to the issues and conflicts occurring around us. Again, in order for professionals to be able to sustain a livelihood, they need to be able to control the sale and license of their works so that they may receive fair compensation for their use. Copyright is the cornerstone of this equation. I can't emphasize the fair compensation issue enough. It's ultimately not about copyright. It's about fair compensation, and copyright is the means to that end. For 32 years prior to my becoming the executive director of ASMP, I worked as a professional photographer creating images and solving problems for companies such as Mack Truck, Heister Company, Ingersoll Rand, and Citicorp. It was the ability to license my works that allowed me to buy a home, put my children through school, and create a better life for my family. Creativity and innovation are essential to the success of an imaging professional. There's a saying in the trade that you're only as good as your last job. Competition is fierce even amongst friends. Client loyalty only goes so far. The ability to profit in an ongoing manner from my images was a key stimulus for my work. In addition to my corporate industrial photography, I created and licensed a number of sunset skyline views of Philadelphia and its significant architectural environments, including the Ben Franklin Parkway, Logan Circle, and the waterfront. These images were repeatedly licensed by companies for business development literature and by other companies needing to highlight Philadelphia attractions. These images were created early morning and in the evenings before and after having worked on assignments for the day, in the cold and in the heat, on rooftops, on docks, with no promise of financial gain other than the knowledge that the images would be unique, of great quality, and that I would own the copyright and be able to make licenses. I was driven to create and innovate. I needed to provide for my family and my future, and copyright gave me the path. The digital revolution was supposed to be better, faster, and cheaper. Well, not all of that promise has come true. It may be better in many ways than film. It may be faster to capture the image. You can have immediate confirmation of success or failure. But in regard to cheaper, it never happened. Professionals now need $5,000 to $7,000 cameras that will become obsolete in 18 months. Lenses extra. In addition, there's a need for expensive computer and storage devices to process and manage the thousands of files. Photographers tend to be equipment junkies appreciating good design and function. The marketplace has responded over the years with numerous innovations. Photographers have bought in, become thought leaders for the pro-amateur and amateur markets, encouraging further innovation and consumption. Copyright is key to a free and open expression of opinion and point of view. If the independent professionals were no longer able to sustain a living from their works, the dissemination of images would be more concentrated in the hands of a few corporate giants who may have their own business interests and agendas. Embarrassing and controversial images might never see the light of day. In conclusion, the equation is simple. Without copyright protection, the public record, our visual heritage, and the stimulus to innovate would be drastically reduced in both quantity and quality. And just quickly, to echo what Mr. Watt said earlier about world solutions and solutions that work outside of the United States, I would urge the committee in their review of the copyright law to seek solutions that do in fact work in a world market, because that's the world we live in. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hanson, welcome.
Chairman Goodlatte, Ranking Member Watt, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting me to testify today on behalf of my company, Yep Rock Records and Red Eye Distribution, headquartered in Haw River, North Carolina, and also on behalf of the small and medium-sized, independently owned businesses that make up the American Association of Independent Music, A2IM. Businesses that, via the creation of musical intellectual property, are improving commerce here and abroad, and via exports, improving America's balance of trade and thus creating jobs in America. My name is Tor Hansen, and my partner and I own a music label and music distributor located in Haw River, North Carolina, which we started in the basement in 1996, and which now employs over 60 employees and distributes music internationally. I'm also a board member of the American Association of Independent Music, A2IM, Board of Directors, a not-for-profit trade organization that represents a broad coalition of over 300 independently owned U.S. music labels of all sizes located across the United States, from Hawaii to Florida, which sector per Billboard magazine comprises 34.5% of recorded music sales in the first half of 2013. For independent music labels and our artists, the internet and related technology and business models have been a great equalizer for us and our ability to create, market, promote, monetize, and introduce new music and cultivate new fans for our label's artists. We honestly feel there is no other industry that has embraced new forms of economic and delivery models as completely as the music industry. That said, small and medium-sized businesses that support the creation of musical intellectual property need to be compensated for the creation and promotion of the music to be able to continue to invest and create jobs. We support the ability of non-demand music services like Pandora and SiriusXM to be able to operate under statutory licenses with rates set by the Copyright Royalty Board. We also support on-demand music services that negotiate direct license on an arm's-length basis. But our music label community needs to be able to decide which non-statutory services should have our music and at what fair price, and be able to ensure that we have viable business models and when it's appropriate to give away our music to super serve our fans. One true strength of a strong regime supporting copyright ownership is to support the international commerce by U.S. businesses in all new mediums. In 2005, the U.S. share of international music market was 34%. For 2012, the latest available data, the IFPI reported a U.S. share of worldwide wholesale recorded music revenues of only 27%. It's clear that now we must expand and reach and need to look abroad to have viable business plans by generating export revenues. We thank the U.S. government, specifically U.S. Commerce Department ITA and the Small Business Administration, for the support of SME Music Creator International trade initiatives, for which my own business has been a beneficiary on a very successful Brazil trade mission. We need to couple this with finally getting enacted an over-the-air radio performance royalty so that royalties of our artists, which sit overseas, do not remain captive, as without legal reciprocity rights, those royalties are not available to U.S.-based independent creators. The bottom line is that independent music label sectors and our artists have aligned ourselves with new consumer models based upon music consumption using many different new technologies. We embrace the responsiveness to new ideas, but request government's continued support of copyright monetization protection to ensure that music creation process and the resulting commerce and job creation continue. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Mr. Lapham, welcome.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I'm John Lapham, the Senior Vice President and General Counsel for Getty Images, the leading provider of news, sports, entertainment, archival, and creative imagery in the United States, and a technology company with a global digital distribution platform. You see our imagery every day in the world's most influential newspapers, magazines, websites, books, television, and movies. Founded in 1995 by Mark Getty and Jonathan Klein, Getty Images has U.S. offices in Chicago, L.A., McLean, Madison, New York, Seattle, and Washington, D.C., supporting 2,000 employees and more than 150,000 photographers. Getty Images has offices in 18 countries, content from over 180, and business customers in more than 200. We were the first company to license a picture on the internet, and today nearly 100% of our business is conducted online. We license 200,000 images daily, and our collection consists of 70 million pictures online, 70 million in archive, and 40,000 new pictures uploaded daily, together with over 1.3 million creative and editorial video clips. We also represent original music tracks from over 10,000 independent musicians. Getty Images' editorial team includes 2 Pulitzer finalists and a White House News Photographer of the Year. Our 24/7 coverage provides images and video of current events to thousands of news media organizations and media publishers, ensuring that the troubled events in parts of the world are brought to light. Our photographers have been placed in dozens of military embeds. We have a significant impact on the digital and copyright economy. While copyright ownership varies across our library, copyright and its accompanying rights and permissions are the foundation for our business. Consequently, strong and effective copyright laws that protect the right to license and not just use creative works are critical for our growth and that of the many thousands of contributors that we represent. Today, we serve more than 1 million customers, many small and medium-sized businesses that depend on powerful imagery to entice and engage their customers. We facilitate an essential copyright marketplace where photographers of every genre and skill level know they can be compensated for contributing to our creative ecosystem. We do have challenges with copyright infringement and expanded perceptions of fair use. To counter this in part, we invest in leading technology to pursue and be paid for pirated content. This is not a total solution. Without laws protecting creative works from prolific free use online, this $7.5 to $8 billion market for visual content and the hundreds of millions of dollars we pay in royalties to photographers would collapse. We believe copyright laws can and should protect and encourage creative content, as well as it protects the technology and technology companies that assist in search and distribution. Getty Images' distribution of creative content is made possible by our investment in a global technology platform that enables the rapid search and licensing of intellectual property for creators and media consumers, which allows them in turn to create and to innovate. We are able to post new editorial images online within minutes or less of photographer transmission. In the last presidential inauguration, our editor noted the sun coming up over the Capitol Dome, an iconic shot on Inauguration Day. Our editor relayed the request, our photographer shot, his images traveled through cable to the trailer, and editors selected the image, posted it online, and by the time the sun crested over the Capitol Dome, the Washington Post was using that image online on the homepage of its website. The demand for content will only continue to grow, and the vast market for licensed creative works can be enhanced with laws that protect creations even in an overwhelmingly digital era. The continued growth in the use of the internet as a forum to develop small and medium-sized businesses is projected to increase markedly in the years ahead, as today just over 1/2 of small businesses have websites. With proper copyright protection and continued technological innovation, we can assist this growth and continue to invest and employ as we do so. The committee's continued vigilance to advance, protect, and enforce copyright laws is critically important to Getty Images' ability to innovate, create jobs, and ensure that the United States maintains a strong competitive edge in the global digital marketplace. I would like to thank the committee for the opportunity to testify today. Our goal in reviewing licensure laws should be to protect creativity and still allow for an active and intelligent marketplace for searching and licensing creative works. When we do so, we all benefit from content that moves, inspires, provokes, educates, and encourages. Getty Images welcomes any future opportunities to assist in this dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lapham. Mr. Chirac, welcome.
Chairman Goodlatte, Ranking Member Watt, and members of the subcommittee. I want to thank the committee for the opportunity to testify this morning. My name is William Sherrick, and I am the president and founder of StereoD, the leader in high-quality 2D to 3D conversions of theatrical content for major motion picture studios. I started StereoD in 2009 as a company of 15 in Southern California. Following the explosion of popularity of 3D films after the release of Avatar, we have grown to nearly 100 times our original size in the last 3 years. As of today, we have converted over 20 full-length feature films, including Captain America, Titanic 3D, The Avengers, Jurassic Park 3D, Iron Man 3, Star Trek Into the Darkness, and most recently Pacific Rim and the upcoming Wolverine. Many think the conversion process is like the flip of a switch. As you will soon see, nothing could be further from the truth. It is a highly technical, labor-intensive process. To give you an idea, Star Trek Into the Darkness required the conversion of roughly 200,000 individual and unique frames and took over 7 months and over 300,000 man-hours of work. This process starts with isolating images through rotoscoping, the outlining of every image in every frame. From there, a depth map is created for each frame. This entails using various shades of gray to indicate the depth for each and every object in that frame. Creating that depth creates missing information in the 2D image. This brings us to the last step, which requires artists to hand paint the missing information created by the 3D image, and to do so in a way that mimics what you see in real life. If everyone would please put on their 3D glasses in front of you, we're going to take a look.
Chairman is responsible for the popcorn.
So this is the 2D image. This is what we annotate to send to our roto artists so they can see what objects they need to roto and in how much detail. Colors. This is what roto is. Rotoscoping, as you can see, we've actually taken away about 50% of the roto images just so you could look at it. This is the depth map that creates the depth, white being the closest thing to you and black being the furthest thing away from you. This is the depth pass. This is where our proprietary software comes into play, and if you see the missing imagery, that's what needs to be hand-painted, and that's the final stereo image. To make all this happen, we recruit the best artists and stereographers in the industry from leading U.S. graphic design and computer technology trade schools. Thanks to 3D, these talented artists now have a new career option in our industry. We are certainly not the sole beneficiary of this dynamic 3D industry. The growth of popularity of these films has led to the creation of a number of companies that either didn't exist at all or grew as a result of expanding their existing businesses into 3D. They are the manufacturers of screens required for 3D movies, 3D products like 3D glasses, and the 3D projectors, just to name a few. And yet none of what I've described today would be possible without strong copyright protections. While many believe that copyright protections only benefit the holders, the impact is actually much broader and deeper. A copyright system that preserves and protects the rights of creators will foster an environment of certainty under which technologies like ours will continue to be developed, leading to the advancement of the entire film industry. Using StereoD as a case study, our very existence and growth from the start has been dependent on the ability of our customers to make an investment in our services. Simply put, if copyright holders are poised to succeed and thrive, so will we. Moreover, it is the economic viability of copyright holders that drives innovation. As with any business, major film studios make investment decisions based on the expectation of profits. If an environment exists that does not provide adequate copyright protection and blockbuster films become unaffordable and unprofitable due to the threat of piracy, this new and thriving 3D industry will be significantly hampered and severely impacted. The reason being that 3D conversions are normally undertaken on major blockbuster films, the very films that are often the greatest targets of piracy. Finally, copyright protections can not only lead to the development of cutting-edge technologies that will improve the entertainment experience for the general public, they will also foster the development of new and emerging companies that are part of the complex, labor-intensive process that goes into making a film and will ultimately enable the entire industry to be successful. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify this morning. I look forward to all of your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chirac, for a very interesting demonstration and for the opportunity you afforded many in the audience to photograph the entire subcommittee wearing black framed glasses.
Goal accomplished.
which I'm sure we'll see shortly on Facebook and Twitter and a few other places. We are now joined by the ranking member of the full committee, and I want to, before we turn to questioning, I want to turn to him so that he can give his opening statement. We now recognize the gentleman from Michigan, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to put my statement in the record. I want to join in welcoming all of the witnesses from Copyright Alliance, from the Records and Distribution Company, Getty Images, Stereo. Let me say that in putting my statement in the record, in summary, I agree with the assertion that copyright law plays a critical role in job creation and also in promoting the national economy. And we should review how copyright law can be strengthened to protect both artists and creators alike. And the copyright law must ensure that creators have a fair chance to be compensated for their creative efforts. And finally, our committee, and I think all of us are in agreement here, should continue to study ways to prevent piracy and fight other violations of copyright law. And I thank the chairman for allowing me to insert my full statement into the record.
I thank the gentleman, and we'll now turn to questions by the members of the committee. Ms. Astars, your testimony discussed the constitutional framework for copyright. How do you think the framers would view the current copyright system and how American society values creators and their works?
Thank you for the question. I think the founders would be pleased to see that copyright at its core is working fairly well. I believe the sorts of debates that we're having today are debates that we've had historically over time, how to ensure innovation, ensure that creators feel empowered both to create and disseminate their works, and how best to balance the laws that we have to encourage that activity as technology changes over time. So I think the founders would be pleased that you're taking a look at the Copyright Act and how it is currently serving the purpose of motivating creators and protecting creators' works, and also encouraging the dissemination of those works.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chirac, some might incorrectly view movie making as not being an advanced technology business, yet you were named, your company was named one of the world's most innovative companies by Fast Company magazine. I would like you to talk more about innovation and your investments to create it.
I think that the film industry has historically driven the entertainment medium forward. You look at colorization, you look at sound. 3D is the new way to make the, with glasses on, 3D is the new way to enhance the movie-going experience. And film more than anything is this amazing social medium for people to go with a group of people and experience something, and we continue to drive that forward. Stereoscopic film is the newest way to do that, and we'll continue to drive that forward as you look to the future. The next thing is 3D without glasses, right? Making it an even more passive experience and not having to put glasses on. And we'll continue to try and drive those technological advancements.
Thank you. Yes, I was fortunate in the last Congress to get legislation passed by the members of this committee in a very bipartisan way and then sent on to the Senate and then ultimately signed into law by President Obama, making it possible for people viewing movies to share that on Netflix and other companies so they can do on Facebook and Twitter and other media the opportunity to enhance that socialization that you referenced. Let me ask all the committee members one more question, and then I'll recognize the ranking member. As the committee undertakes the review of copyright laws, what are the overarching issues that we should keep in mind as they relate to the copyright world as a whole, in addition to your specific part of it? And since there are 5 of you, hit the highest point or two, don't take too much time. We'll start with you, Ms. Astars.
Thank you, Chairman. As I referenced in my testimony, I think the main principles to keep in mind when looking at copyright law are the ones that the founders put before us. That is, that copyright law should encourage both the creation and the dissemination of works, and that when you're looking at what that requires, you look at it from the perspective of all creators who are involved in that process, and you evaluate the reasons why creators put works out publicly and what empowers them to put works out publicly. I think you should keep in mind experiences like Eric Hart's, which I referenced in my testimony, as well as experiences like Matt Herron's, and be motivated by those types of creators as you look to the future as well.
Mr. Mopsik.
I believe, Mr. Chairman, in recent years, everyone's figured out how to make money from photographs except for photographers. And I would encourage going forward, I guess the big issues for us are ultimately fair compensation, and I'm also concerned about the expansion of fair use at this point. But those would be the big issues for us.
Mr. Hanson.
Well, here we go. With music, you're dealing with a lot smaller file sizes than some of these larger, more complex movies and what have you. But I'd say the ease of file sharing and the way that search has allowed the trading of the non-legitimate sources for music, meaning the ones that are getting paid, is an issue that needs to be looked at, and to figure out how that can be sorted to not allow those sort of things to be so easily done. And then clearly the fair compensation for the copyrights. So on
Mr. Lapham.
Thank you. For us, it's fair use creep. We think there has to be a balance between having enriching content to find and then also having that content available in order to have something to search for. And as a creative and technology company, we see the value in both and striking that balance.
Thank you. Mr. Schrack.
Thank you. I think for me, it's keeping in mind all of the other people that are affected by copyright law and how many jobs are created, not just by the content, by the creators or the holders of the copyright, but my company wouldn't exist if studios didn't make big films and the amount of employees we have. That's a very important thing to take into consideration.
Thank you. The chair recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Watt, for his questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As has become my policy, I'm going to defer and go last in the queue, so I'll defer to Mr. Conyers.
Thank you. I welcome all the witnesses. Let me start with Director Istars. Do you believe that we should take a measured approach when reviewing copyright law?
I do, Mr. Conyers. I believe the copyright laws at its core are working and are serving both creators and innovators well. I do believe there are areas which are ripe for improvement, and that the committee is doing the right thing by looking at the laws and how they could be updated to meet our current needs.
Thank you. To any one of the other witnesses, who can name steps that we might, as a committee, take that would be helpful in our analysis of copyright law?
I can take a crack at that. I think some of the steps would include what you're doing right now, and that is hearing from content creators, from people that benefit from having the protections of copyrighted works, also hearing from technology companies and having the importance of the ability to find the content, because creative content that is made and you're not able to locate it is of little value. And so I think that hearing from both constituents is great, and then also looking at the economic impacts on both sides. Thanks.
Thanks for your suggestions. Mr. Hanson, have you embraced yet the new business models to distribute your music?
Sure, yeah. We are looking for where we can find customers with, seeing our content and paying for our content wherever they are. We recognize that these customers have a value to add to us as long as they can value what we bring to them.
Mm-hmm. Does anyone have any other recommendations about steps this committee might want to take in terms of our analysis of copyright law?
If I could comment
Please.
briefly, Mr. Conyers. I think there are important steps that you can take that don't require revising Title 17 as well. And here I refer to your oversight authority and your ability to encourage stakeholders to take responsible steps together to try and solve the problems that we're facing in the marketplace.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And finally, what about Mr. Hanson, over-the-air radio performance royalties? You have
Yes,
a view on that?
I had mentioned that in my testimony, and we see, and as I had mentioned, over-the-air is something that the United States does not pay out as a royalty, and every other country in the world is holding royalties for our copyrights because we do not pay these things out. And we see that as something, and appreciate Mr. Watt's comments earlier, that this is something that really needs to be looked at. And we are continuing to look and to talk about how we can make that happen.
Very good. Any other recommendations you'd like to make? Yes.
Yes, Representative Conyers. I think there are some simple changes that could be made to the actual statute that would make it easier for, in particular, for photographers who I believe have more registrations than any other group of rights holders, but that would make it easier for them to register, in particular, eliminating the differential between published and unpublished, which is a cause for concern and debate, I believe, by everyone from the copyright to the Copyright Office to the rights holders. And I guess also I'm not clear about the need for deposit copies and also the institution of a small claims process for infringements.
Well, thank you very much. And I'll yield back any time left remaining.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Congressman Chaffetz from Utah.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here. This is an important topic, and I appreciate all the expertise that's here in this room and at this table. And Mr. Hanson, my question is first for you, and congratulations on your success. I mean, a great American success story, starting from your garage, 60 employees now, and that's what we like to see, and you're the type of business that we want to see growing and expanding. And so let's talk about how you drive new fans, new audience. I mean, it's a very competitive atmosphere out there. How do you do that? How do you do that? Where do you go to find new fans?
Well, we have a staff of people that we employ, as well as artists that we also compensate, as well as they have their jobs of being career musicians. And it is, we try at this point to identify the methods and the customers and the partners out there that can best reach that audience to take,
I know,
it is
but
across the board.
No doubt you got an array of people that help you do that. Where do you go to actually find them? To find the customers? Where are they?
They are listening to music everywhere and anywhere. It's online. It's on the radio. It's in the clubs. It is all over the place.
So you have a group that's touring and they've got a hot song and they're going from club to club. How do you promote that? Where do you go to promote that?
We are promoting it across the board. We're crossing again from the ground up and from the top down.
You put an ad in the Yellow Pages?
No.
Okay.
We go onto their, we recognize their fans through Facebook. We recognize their fans on YouTube. We recognize that we need to go to college radio. We need to go to commercial radio. We need to go
so there's a value.
There's where music lovers are listening.
It would be fair to say there's a value for being on the radio.
Sure, just like there's a value to being on Facebook or YouTube or being in a club.
And internet radio, it's something I've been keenly involved with and engaged with. Certainly, you're finding fans on the internet radio. Tell me how you use the internet radio.
Well, the larger we send our music to programmers, and they program our music on internet radio. In some cases, they're performing on internet radio, so live. They go into the studio and they'll perhaps get interviewed and that sort of thing.
I guess the point I'm trying to make, Mr. Chairman, is there is great value. There is compensation in driving audiences and driving people to clubs and creating awareness. That is where the generation that is listening to music today, we've got to find the proper balance. I understand that. But I also think there ought to be more competition and more outlets for you on internet radio. I don't think it's working right now for most people. We've got a big dominant players having great success, but they still lose money every month, and it doesn't work. We want artists to be fairly compensated, and there is value to being on the radio. And again, you're not going to go to the Yellow Pages. YouTube and Facebook are but two outlets, but where we're going to be 5 and 10 years from now, I think is going to be a key to our future, and it's something we need to continue to explore. Going back to Mr. Mopsick, tell me a little bit more about your experience with the Copyright Office. And maybe anybody else who wants to join here. What are the positives, but where are the challenges? What works well and what doesn't work well at the Copyright Office?
Well, I mean, for photographers, the creation of the ECO system was a big step forward to be able to register online. Our challenge is that, a photographer may go out routinely create over 1,000 images in a day. I mean, you hear the number of clicks going on here with the photographers covering this event. It's easily in the hundreds of images. Then they have to go home and process those and decide what they're going to register or how that's going to happen. And right now, one of the things that we've been trying to promote to the Copyright Office and been in discussions with them about for a while, and they seem quite agreeable to it, it's just a matter of making it happen, is to create a link from within a photographer's workflow so that when they bring a job in, they can actually register images from their regular workflow and not have to go outside to go to the Copyright Office to make that registration. And we believe that would, I guess, fulfill one of the goals of the office to encourage registrations. I mean, some of the other, I guess, frustrations we have is that if, in fact, you haven't registered prior to infringement, you're locked out of statutory damages and court costs, at which point very few photographers can afford to pursue an infringement matter in the absence of a small claims option. So they're effectively denied due process because they have to go into federal court to file a case, and no litigator is going to take that case without the promise a statutory damage. So unless the photographer happens to be independently wealthy and willing to chase windmills, he's locked out. Those are, I think, some of the key issues.
Thanks, Chairman. Yield back.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Congresswoman Chu from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first, I'd like to submit 2 items for the record. One is an op-ed in the Hills Congressional blog by Eric Hart, who is Congressmember Cobol's constituent, and I'm submitting it because he couldn't be here today. The other is a letter I received from East Bay Ray, who's guitarist of the Dead Kennedys, John McCree, who's songwriter and founding member of the band Cake, and 12 other musicians, songwriters, and composers who wanted to remind us all that their careers exist because of copyright laws, and they wanted to make sure that individual creators are invited to testify in future hearings.
Okay, that's it?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Without objection.
Okay. Well, well, I'd actually like to ask questions about copyright infringement and how we are dealing with it right now. And so first let me ask Sandra A. Stars and Tor Hansen about the voluntary agreements that we have. We've seen 2 voluntary agreements to address this issue of online theft. And the first is the best practices guideline for ad networks. And this was started by Google along with leading ad networks such as Microsoft, Yahoo, and AOL that announced best practices that would block sites dedicated to online piracy from using their ad services. And then there's also the copyright alert system that ISPs such as AT&T, Verizon, Comcast, and Time Warner are doing along with the content providers to issue warning notices to users when they've used rogue sites that have infringed upon copyrights. How would you evaluate some of these solutions that have emerged, and what can we do in Congress to monitor and assess the impacts of these efforts?
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman Chu. I'm encouraged that other stakeholders in the marketplace are taking positive steps and recognizing their role in addressing infringements. I think they are doing so because they see this as something they need to do for their clients, for the brands which they place ads for, as well as for their own reasons. The efforts, in my mind, work best when creators are fully consulted in coming up with these best practices, and when the requirements, for instance, for alerting a ad network to an infringing site, placing ads on that infringing site, are ones that are actually geared towards something that an artist could actually do themselves. I was a little disappointed to see that this latest best practices document for ad networks required artists to be fully conversant in data tracing and figuring out exactly which ad network a particular ad had been generated by, and I think that's probably beyond the abilities of most artists who are, on the road performing and working and trying to make a living. With regard to the copyright alert system, I'm encouraged that that is taking place. Again, I think it's great that it applies to movies, music, and TV programs. I would love to see it expanded to address other types of creative works, such as photography and books and perhaps even lyric sites, because none of those are currently covered. So I'm both encouraged, but I think there is still work to be done.
Mr. Hansen.
We are also encouraged by that these things are now moving into place, and we're starting to get the messaging out there. I think it's going to take a two-prong effect, or many prongs really, that the messaging continues to go out there to the consumers that this is not the right way, the right behavior to be taking product, and as well as removing it and eliminating the access at some point somehow.
And Ms. Astars, I asked what could we do in Congress to monitor and assess the impact of these efforts?
Well, I think with your oversight role in this area, it would be fully appropriate for you to invite stakeholders who have begun to take these measures in to share with you how those are working, what seems to be the response. Are they having the effect that was intended? I think also in particular when stakeholders announce they're taking measures themselves, it would be very interesting to understand how those play out over time. For instance, Google announced last year that it was changing its algorithm to limit the types of infringing sites that might otherwise rise to the top of search results. And I'd be interested in hearing how that is working and whether that's truly having the effect that they intended.
Thank you. I yield back.
Chair now recognizes Congressman Smith from Missouri.
Wow, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's nice to be the newest member on the subcommittee and actually not go last. So getting here earlier pays off. This committee hearing has been quite informative and very helpful, being new and learning a lot of the issues facing copyright. And my question is for all of you, in fact, with the changes in technology, with everything, with the internet, in all the different areas, what do you all see or anticipate as being the biggest struggles facing copyright? I mean, the absolute biggest struggles, or the best opportunities that you have with changing technology?
I can start if that's appropriate. I think, as I said in my testimony, we see ourselves as partners and collaborators with the technology community, and some of the issues that have come up through questioning already are some of the challenges that I think all of us need to struggle with. One, for instance, is ad-supported sites that are infringing sites. That's something that I think is in the best interests of all legitimate businesses to try and address. Similarly, credit card and other payment systems. I know that numerous of the credit card processors are taking very positive steps themselves to prevent their payment processing systems from being used on infringing sites. I think these types of activities, which cut off the dollars flowing to what are most often foreign rogue sites, are very important and are things that we need to maintain and to expand to other areas as well. Most people find the content, the movies, the music, the books that they're looking for online through a result of using a search engine. And so I'd be very interested also in seeing efforts expand into that area as well.
Representative Smith, I'd like to add, from a photographer perspective, few issues. One would be funding or additional funding or more funding for the Copyright Office to allow them to advance the work that they've engaged in. Beyond that, I think a key issue for photographers is one of persistent attribution, which goes to, in effect, how rights holders are identified. It's a huge technology issue, but one that I think people have been trying to solve for a while, but we don't have an absolute answer to that yet. But if there were, I mean, right now it's too easy for all of the identifying information to be stripped from a photograph as it moves through the digital space, and so the image can be used, reused in multiple sources without ever being able to find the actual rights holder. There are some ways to search that out, but not particularly great.
I think a lot of the ideas, the big ones have been spoken about, but, just to reinforce that, that that the search and the advertising and that the sort of those things that raise to the top that are not the legitimate and real partners that are valuing our copyrights find a way to move down the list. And it's a challenge, but it's one that really needs to be looked at.
For us, Mr. Smith, I think it's finding the balance between locating content and ensuring content creators are compensated. And then I also think it's finding a sensible alternative for dispute resolution. And we are big fans of the Copyright Office's efforts to put out a small claims court process for copyright.
Okay, gentleman's time has expired, but if Mr. Shurek, you want to quickly respond, please?
I will quickly. Yeah, thank you. I think for us, it's protecting our customers' copyrights and then attacking piracy and making sure that we go after and take care of people that are pirating the films that we work on, because if they don't get made, we can't convert them to 3D.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Congressman Deutsch from Florida. I think we have time to get through that.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and I'm glad we're having this hearing today on the role of copyrights in America. And I'd start just by noting that I think too often we only associate big celebrities and big companies with copyrights and forget about the millions of lesser-known creators whose work we might recognize, but whose work likely will never appear in the entertainment news or in the gossip magazines. And it's in that vein that I'm honored to chair the Songwriters Caucus with Marsha Blackburn and pay tribute to those great American creators whose work provides such an important part of the soundtrack to our lives, but whose names we often don't know. I want to thank you, Ms. A-Stars, for highlighting your own family story, along with those of other creators in your testimony. And I wanted to ask you as a follow-up something that you raised. I agree with you that our copyright law has to remain rooted in tech-neutral premises. I wanted your thoughts on how to ensure that the laws can grow with ever-changing technologies so that we're not picking favorites, we're not stifling potentially game-changing innovations, and at the same time, we're not opening creative works to new avenues for theft.
That's a big question. I think first what you're doing here today and examining the contributions both of the copyright community and of the technology community to our health and well-being as a nation is the exact right place to start. I think through going through this process in a measured way and understanding what types of innovation each of our communities is engaged in will help you pinpoint the areas where some adjustments might be needed. I think the challenge that I hear most frequently from my grassroots members is the challenge in quickly and efficiently responding to infringements online. That's just another iteration of the same sorts of challenges that people have been facing with their works for decades and decades, and I think we'll keep seeing these same sorts of challenges moving forward. But we've been talking about certain adjustments that might be necessary or appropriate to look at, and looking at the DMCA may be one of those places, and making sure it works for independent creators.
And realizing how big a question that is, I look forward to continuing this conversation offline, just so I can try to get in a couple more points. I wanted to just go back to the fundamentals, which we often don't do, that Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution demands the Congress promote the progress of science and the useful arts, and it does that with meaningful copyright protections. It certainly helped that many of our founding fathers were creators themselves. They were inventors. But I think it reflects an even greater recognition that the long-term success of our country depends on the work of inventors as well as artists and creators in moving our country forward, in improving all of our lives with new medicines and technologies, but also in shaping our culture. It's often pointed out in this subcommittee, and I might add, not said enough in other contexts, that our strongest export is our intellectual property. It's the only area where America enjoys a trade surplus, and it provides a great source of goodwill for America overseas. The total estimated impact of copyright on the U.S. economy is over $1.5 trillion. The film industry alone supports 2 million jobs and contributes over $14 billion in exports. Sales in the music industry exceeded $7 billion, and American authors and photographers and artists help promote our culture in every corner of the world. All of that progress and innovation is threatened when copyrights aren't protected. The music industry was very publicly on the front lines of the problems when the digital age made theft ubiquitous. And they've worked painfully through these new challenges to embrace a whole host of new platforms that make digital sales and streams a source of incredible growth. And I think that what we've seen there and the fact that the potential to bring the music industry back to where it was even pre-Napster through all this new technology shows the point that you made, Ms. A-Stars, that content and technology are not locked in some perpetual struggle looking for Congress to balance competing interests. To the contrary, having access to movies and music and books gives people a reason to adopt the latest technology and innovative platforms, help creators reach audiences that they would never otherwise touch. So it seems like our goal as a nation is to grow the pie for everyone fairly instead of fighting about how we slice up what we already see today. In that vein, Mr. Hansen, your testimony explains that, in your testimony, you said that the compulsory license ensures that all sound recordings are treated and compensated equally. That should be the goal. Now, some critics claim that under the compulsory license, not all music services are treated equally, and I'm confused by that. I'll ask this question. You can respond in writing. Under the license, you can't withhold music from any service or force them to pay different rates than the CRB has set. Can you? And I'd like you just to respond to those claims in writing, since I don't think we have time now. And I thank the chairman.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, to our panel, I apologize. We are called to votes. We are going to be voting on the House floor for at least an hour. And after consulting with my ranking member, I've made the decision that we will not return. However, each member does have the opportunity to submit questions in writing to you, and I apologize to you very deeply, but the votes came earlier than we anticipated. So this concludes today's hearing. Thanks to all of our witnesses for attending and the people in the gallery. Without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days to submit additional written questions for the witnesses or additional materials for the record. This hearing is adjourned.